Welcome to this week's edition of In the Clubhouse with EMD Baseball. I'm Andy Kirikides, joined by my wonderful co-host Keith Glasser. How we doing?
Great. How are you?
Good. Topic for today, and I think this is a good one as the summertime approaches here, and this is specifically relevant for 26s, definitely relevant for 27s next year. But I think often what happens is a lot of times players and families rely solely on their travel ball schedule as their recruiting platform. And I think it's really important for people to identify other ways to get yourself in front of the coaches that you're trying to get in front of, right? So what can you do in addition to your travel schedule? What can you supplement? On-campus camps, showcases, workouts. Not all of these tournaments are necessarily conducive to get recruited, depending on what you're looking to be recruited as or where you fall in the grand scheme of things, right? One of the things I always go to is, Georgia's always a really popular thing, right? And it's often a selling point for travel programs, going down to the perfect game or the PBR. If you're a Northeast kid, Division I player, Division III player, I don't know if it really matters that much anymore. Going down to Georgia likely isn't going to get you in front of a lot of the schools that you're probably trying to get in front of. And I think it's important to understand that tournament can be really fun and can be great. But if you're a kid who's getting or is looking to stay in the Northeast, a lot of those Northeast schools don't go down there anymore because they're just seeing the teams that they would normally see. So is there something instead of a tournament like that? Or if you're going to Hoover, Alabama, and you have no interest in playing in, the Midwest or kind of the Southeast, and you're trying to play in a different region, a lot of the schools that aren't from that direct region, they're not going to be there. And being smart about where you're going and understanding that your travel schedule in a lot of cases likely isn't going to meet all your needs. So taking the time to map out other ways to get yourself in front of these coaches. And I think there's a variety of ways to do it with on-campus camps and really targeting some schools that you like. There's some showcases that do a really good job to get you in front of a lot of guys. But I think it's really important for players and families to evaluate their travel schedule. Make sure that you've identified any time gaps where you can go and get in front of coaches. And you got, especially if you're a 26, you got to look out for number one right now. And if not going to Georgia gets you in front of 10 or 15 coaches because you decide to go to 2 on-campus camps during that window of schools that you're interested in or that are interested in you, I would argue that the experience down in Georgia isn't going to be better for you than actually putting yourself in front of people that are going to evaluate you. And I think this is particularly important for players that are more likely Division III players. There's not many Division III programs that are traveling down to Georgia to go and watch, right? You're going to have your more local stuff, but the Division III schools in Pennsylvania and New Jersey and New York and New England, they're not flying down to Georgia. There's very few of them that do, and they're very niche programs that go down there because they recruit nationally. But even most of the high academic Division IIIs, they're not flying down to Georgia. They're going to stay. They're going to have their own on-campus camps. They're going to be going to workouts where there's high academic kids. So being smart about that, I think, is really, really important because if you're a 26 trying to get recruited right now, you got about a 4-month window that you really need to take advantage of, and you don't have time to waste it traveling and spending money to go to places that may not be all that fruitful for you.
Yeah, and I think the easiest way to find that out is to ask, right? Like, ask the coaches that you're interested in from a program standpoint and who are interested in you, where are you going to be? And if they're not going to be down in Georgia, then that can start to frame where it is that you're going to go and what you're going to do. I think the Georgia thing, especially over the course of the last couple of years, the rule changes that we've talked about ad nauseum on here, it really has kind of reshaped what that tournament is. It's still, it's a good tournament and it's an experience, but on the same hand, from a recruitment standpoint, it might not be the best for what it is you're looking to do. And for some people, it will be, right? Like, let's be very clear. For some people, it will be the right decision to make and go do and get in front of coaches and be seen. Like, you need to understand where you are in your process and what you're doing. And to your point, the vast majority of Division threes aren't going down there. Are there some? Yeah. I know Case goes down there from Coast Guard, but it's Coast Guard, so he has to, right? Like, when I was at RPI, I didn't go down to Georgia. It wasn't an event that I went to. So I think that being smart about, and asking where guys are going to be at is just as good as, is far better than guessing, right? So ask that question first and then decide whether or not that's going to be for you, and then figure out what it is that you need to get into from a scheduling standpoint so that you can find the camps it is that you should be going to, or clinics, or whatever it might be to get you in front of the coaches it is that you want to be in front of.
Yeah, it's kind of crunch time, right? It's not panic time, but you got to be smart with your time, right? And you make a great point that each individual case is different. Like, every single player's path to getting recruited is going to be different. And you have to have an honest look at where you fit, schools that you're targeting, schools that are interested in you, and make sure that you're doing the best that you can to get in front of those schools. And there's some guys that are going to go and play in some of these big tournaments, and it's not going to be the best fit for them. And I always come back to the academic portion of it, right? The high academic world, and just being really smart about making sure you're getting in front of the right guys. But I think it goes for everybody. And this is the hard part to tease through sometimes, is figuring out where you fit in this whole process and what's going to be productive for you. But I know it's something that we talk about with the families that we work with, is really getting down to the nitty gritty of what you want out of this and where you want to be. And then putting together a plan to make sure that you get in front of the right coaches, that you give yourself an opportunity to be seen by the schools that you're interested in. Because the reality is that not all of these guys are going to show up to go and watch one guy. So at some point, you probably have to make an effort to get in front of them and not count on them coming to you, which is, that's the reality for most kids. So take the time to map this out. Take the time to have an honest discussion about what's important to you. Identify those schools that are going to be a fit. And then you have to take your summer ball schedule and go, all right, we have a gap here, we have a gap here, we have a gap here. This tournament might not be a good fit for us. And then you got to go find ways to fill that gap and make that mid-June to mid-August time period, that 8-week window, it needs to be as productive as possible.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest part, right? Like, there are all these big tournaments all over the country that you can and have been the sexy option to go to. And I don't necessarily know if it's the best option for everyone, when you can find, other opportunities to be in front of the coaches it is that you want to be in front of. And I think that you hit it on the head at the start of, you need to put number one first and understand that, like, this is your process and you really only get one go at this. So you want to make sure that you're filling those gaps in your summer schedule with events that are going to get you in front of the coaches you want to. And you might have to make hard decisions on whether or not you should go to, one event over another. And these are hard conversations we have with families. We have one that I actually just saw this weekend who, we had to have that conversation last year about not going to a place that all the schools that he was being recruited by weren't going to be at, and going to a place that all the schools that were recruiting him were going to be at. And ultimately ended up working out for him because he made the decision to go to the place where all the schools were going to be at to see him throw. So it's not, they're not one-off things, and I think it can be a hard conversation and hard to do, but at the same time, if this is what you want to do in order to get in front of these coaches, you might have to make some hard decisions to do some of those things. But it's understanding, what that looks like. And I think for me, it goes back to the start where I said, just ask the question, right? Like, hey, coach, are you going to be in Georgia? Like, no, we're not going to be there. We're going to be at these 3 events. I'm going to be at X camp. My assistant's going to be at this camp, and my other assistant's going to be at this tournament. And those are the 3 events we're going to be at when you're down there. Like, we're not going to be able to see you play. If you're going to go, let us know how you do. If you're not going to be there and you're going to be somewhere else, let us know so we can get eyes on. And it makes it, it makes the communication a lot easier. And I think on the other hand, it shows that you're willing to do some things to get in front of coaches to achieve the goal it is that you've set out to do on the front end. So and it's far different to me than, the just choosing to not play. Like, you're choosing to get in front of some coaches that all want to, ultimately recruit you and see you, and you got to be where they are. They can't recruit you if they're not going to, at the very least, be able to see you once or twice and make a decision on what you can do in game. So it's making those decisions to get in front of those guys so that you can ultimately be recruited at those programs.
I think I got 2 things that I want to add, because I think we covered the topic, but I think these are other 2 things that need to be said regarding this. One, do your homework on the travel team that you're going to play for, right? And have these conversations with that coach. Get an understanding of what their schedule is, right? There's teams that don't do those big tournaments that are really, really successful at placing players in college programs because they do really targeted stuff. They go to team camps. They go to more local tournaments. They'll be in Diamond Nation. They'll be up in Boston for the Boston Open, right? Get an idea of what their schedule is and try to overlay where you fit in the grand scheme of things. And is that schedule going to be conducive? The other piece is that if you do decide, hey, I got to do some other stuff outside of my schedule, communicate with the coaches and the people who run that organization early and often. Most of these guys, the vast majority of these guys, want kids to find a place to play college baseball. And if you communicate with them openly and honestly and ahead of time, and you don't put them in a bad spot where you're a pitcher and you're supposed to throw on Friday and you call that guy on Wednesday afternoon and say, hey, I'm not coming this weekend, I'm going to another camp. That's grounds to be a little bit frustrated if you're one of the coaches on that organization. But if you sit them down 2 or 3 weeks in advance, you say, hey, coach, listen, I'm getting some interest from this school. I really want to go to their camp. I think it's an opportunity for me to get in front of them. I'm going to go to this camp this weekend. I'm not going to be there on that Friday and that Saturday. I'll be there on Sunday. Coach is generally going to be pretty flexible with this kind of stuff, and they're going to work with you to make sure that you get the most out of your summer. But if you don't communicate, you put yourself in a situation where you're not doing good by the people that are trying to help you. So make sure you communicate. Make sure you have these conversations with those people. They should be understanding. If they're not, that's a red flag. But if you put them in a situation where you tell them super late that something's happening, not the best way to go about it. Make sure you communicate early and often in order to do this the right way.
Nailed it.
Anything else you want to add?
Nope.
All right. Put together a plan and execute it. Check in next week. We'll talk to you then. Thanks, everybody. Thank you for listening this week. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and smash that like button for us. Check us out on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, as well as Spotify. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at EMD Baseball. If you want to find out what me and Keith do to help families and players navigate the recruiting process, go ahead and check us out on emdbaseball.com. Take a few minutes to check out our new online academy. I promise you'll get some good information out of that. Thanks again for listening. Check in with you next week.